All right, so we're back and ready to dive into another chapter of To Kill a Mockingbird. We left off last time with Jem wrapping up his reading punishment with Mrs. DeBose.
Yeah, such a powerful ending to that chapter.
Really is, and she passes away, but not before revealing some real strength.
Strength and grace.
Right, definitely. So now we're jumping ahead to chapter 12.
Summertime in Maycomb.
Summertime, but Dill's missing this year.
Oh, right, Dill.
And Jem. Well, Jem's just not the Jem we knew from last summer.
Oh, that's right.
He's 12 now.
Yeah, big changes for Jem in this chapter. He's definitely more, well, moody, wouldn't you say?
Moody, yeah.
Ah.
Scout even thinks he might have a tapeworm. She describes him as being all withdrawn.
And constantly snapping at her.
Yeah, for not acting like a girl.
Right. Classic older brother stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Poor Scout, though. I mean, she really doesn't understand what's going on with him.
It's that classic sibling dynamic, watching the older one pull away as they grow up.
Right, right. You know, it's interesting, though. Scout doesn't seem too bothered by Dill being gone.
She's so matter-of-fact about it.
Yeah, she mentions their permanent fiancé status like it's the most normal thing in the world.
Which it kind of is for them at that age. Shows how innocent she still is, you know?
Totally. But then the chapter shifts gears and we get this glimpse into the wider world beyond Scout's childhood.
The Great Depression,
Yeah.
right. Atticus is off at the state legislature dealing with the whole economic crisis.
Yeah, they're in emergency session. But even with all that serious stuff going on, Lee throws in this funny little detail.
Oh, you mean about the cartoon and the Montgomery Advertiser?
Yes. Atticus chained to a desk, barefoot, being taunted by girls.
That's a bit of a jab at his work ethic.
Apparently. But, it also shows how dedicated he is to his principles. Willing to take on tough challenges, even if it means being ridiculed.
It's almost foreshadowing.
Oh, I think it definitely is. But before we get to all that...
We got to talk about first purchase.
Yes. Calpurnia takes Jem and Scout to her church. And let me tell you, it's an eye-opening experience for them and for us as readers, too.
It's our first real look into Calpurnia's life outside of the Finch household.
Exactly. And it all starts with this really tense confrontation. They get to the church, and this woman, Lula, she's furious that Calpurnia brought white children to a black church.
It's a stark reminder of the racial divisions, even within Maycomb.
It really is. And it's interesting how Calpurnia's whole demeanor changes in that moment. Her language, her tone.
Code switching.
Yeah, exactly. She's got this whole other side to her that we haven't seen before. But thankfully, Zebo steps in.
The garbage collector.
Yeah, and he diffuses the whole situation. Welcomes Jem and Scout, reminds us that not everyone in the black community shares Lula's hostility.
And then once they're inside...
Inside, it's like a whole different world.
No hymnals, no piano.
And the singing?
Lining, they call it. Zebo reads a line, and the congregation repeats it.
Fascinating. It's all about participation. Everyone's voice matters.
Then we have Reverend Sykes' sermon.
Which is surprisingly similar to Scout's experience at her own church.
Right. He talks about morality, warns against gambling and drinking.
Strange women, he says, which is kind of ironic.
Yeah, considering they then take up a collection.
For Tom Robinson's wife, Helen, Reverend Sykes makes it clear she's struggling because of the prejudice surrounding Tom's case, even though he's only been accused.
But that's the thing about prejudice. It doesn't wait for proof. It impacts people's lives regardless of guilt or innocence.
And then, well, this part just blew me away.
Calpurnia can read.
Not only can she read, she taught Zebo to read using, get this, Blackstone's commentaries.
A law book gifted to her by Scout's grandfather.
I know, right? It completely changes how we see her. She's not just a housekeeper.
She's a woman with hidden depths, an intellect that's been stifled by the limitations of her society.
It's like she's been preparing for this whole fight for justice that's about to unfold.
And then, bam, chapter ends with Aunt Alexandra on the porch.
Unannounced. And something tells me things are about to get a whole lot more complicated.
Oh, definitely. Aunt Alexandra's arrival changes everything.
We'll have to wait and see how it all plays out in the next chapter.
It's interesting, isn't it? Aunt Alexandra shows up right when Jem and Scout are starting to grapple with all these big questions about race and identity.
It's almost like she represents the old Maycomb mindset, all about tradition and those old ways of thinking.
And she arrives just as Atticus is about to take on this hugely controversial case, defending Tom Robinson.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder how she's going to react to Calpurnia. To her role in the family, I mean.
Yeah, we see how close Calpurnia is with Jem and Scout. She really steps up, especially when Atticus is away.
But will Aunt Alexandra see it that way? I mean, with her, her views.
That's a good question. That makes me think about Calpurnia and her double life we were talking about. Raising Jem and Scout, running the Finch household,
Yeah.
all while navigating these two completely different worlds.
It really speaks to her strength and resilience. Just imagine the constant code switching, changing her language and behavior depending on who she's with.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
Makes you wonder how many others were living like that in Macomb. Across the South, really.
Hiding their true selves just to survive.
Exactly. And it highlights how insidious prejudice is, how it forces people to compartmentalize themselves.
It's also a reminder of the power dynamics at play. I mean, Calpurnia, she's clearly intelligent, capable.
But because she's black,
She's limited to a domestic role.
that was the reality of the Jim Crow South. Opportunities for black individuals, no matter how talented, were incredibly limited.
Which makes her decision to teach Zebo to read even more remarkable.
Doesn't it? I mean, she was denied that opportunity, but she made sure her son had it.
That's powerful. A real act of defiance. Rejection of those limitations imposed by a racist society.
And it underlines the importance of education as a path to empowerment.
When Calpurnia explained why she code switches, she said, "Folks don't like to have somebody around knowing more than they do." It makes me think about how insecurity plays into prejudice.
It's true, people feel threatened by those who are different, who challenge their worldview.
And instead of confronting those feelings, they lash out.
Yeah. And, it's also interesting how Calpurnia handles it. She doesn't force her way of speaking on others.
She recognizes that true change has to come from within. A willingness to learn and to see things from a different perspective.
Which brings us back to Aunt Alexandra. She represents a way of thinking that's deeply embedded in Macomb. And that mindset's going to be directly challenged by Atticus's defense of Tom Robinson.
Oh, absolutely. It's a clash of values, the old versus the new. And it's all playing out within the Finch family.
With Jem and Scout caught right in the middle.
Their childhood innocence is about to be really tested.
But they have Atticus and Calpurnia to guide them. And they have each other, which is crucial in the face of this kind of adversity.
When we were talking about that happy cemetery by Calpurnia's church, with all the colorful glass and Coca-Cola bottles, it seemed to represent the resilience of the black community, finding joy and beauty even in the face of such hardship.
But then you have Lula's hostility.
Right, which reminds us that there are divisions even within the community.
It's a reminder that no group is a monolith, and Lee doesn't shy away from those complexities. It's what makes the story so rich.
And that sermon, while it focused on morality, it also exposed some hypocrisy within the church.
Yeah, the same folks who condemn gambling are willing to, gamble during the week. They rally around Helen Robinson, but she still can't find work because of the prejudice surrounding her husband.
It highlights those contradictions, doesn't it, in human nature, and how tough it is to actually live up to our ideals. Speaking of hypocrisy, how do you think Aunt Alexandra is going to react when she finds out Calpurnia taught Zebo to read?
Oh, that's a great question.
She clearly values education and tradition. But will those values apply to a black man in Macomb?
I don't know. We'll have to see. But remember, Aunt Alexandra is a product of her time.
So her views are definitely shaped by the prejudices of that era.
Exactly. And how will she handle Scout? With her tomboyish ways.
Will she try to make her more ladylike?
I wouldn't be surprised. And that could lead to some real conflicts between Aunt Alexandra, Scout, and maybe even Atticus, who, has always encouraged Scout to be herself.
I have a feeling Aunt Alexandra is going to shake things up at the Finch house.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
Absolutely. Her arrival adds a whole new layer of complexity to the family dynamics and the social tensions they're facing.
And with the trial approaching, I think we can expect things to get even more intense. In Macomb,
Oh, yeah. Things are about to get really interesting. Chapter 12, it's like the calm before the storm.
It's kind of amazing how Harper Lee uses all these little details, to hint at the bigger things to come. Like that happy cemetery at Calpurnia's church. On the surface, it's a charming image, but then it also kind of points to that strength of the black community. Their ability to find joy, even in the face of all that prejudice.
Yeah, and then you have Calpurnia teaching Zebo to read.
With Blackstone's commentaries.
A legal text.
I know, it makes you think is Lee suggesting something here?
About the future, maybe? Black individuals using their education to, I don't know, to challenge the very laws that have been used to oppress them.
It's a really powerful thought. And, it strikes me that Jem and Scout are going through their own kind of education in this chapter.
Oh yeah, definitely. They're learning about race, identity, even religion, in a way they never could at their own church.
It's like they're starting to see the hypocrisy that exists, even in places that are supposed to be about morality and justice.
Like those church members who gamble during the week, or the community that supports Helen Robinson while simultaneously making it impossible for her to find work.
It's a lot for them to process. And then you throw Aunt Alexander into the mix. I can't wait to see how she reacts to everything they've learned, how her presence will change their understanding of the world.
I think it's safe to say her views are going to clash with those more progressive values Atticus is trying to instill in his children.
Oh, for sure. And that clash, it's bound to create some friction in the Finch household.
Especially with the trial coming up. This chapter, it feels like the calm before the storm.
It really does. So much is about to change and make them.
Yeah. Lee's setting the stage for a powerful exploration of some really big themes here. Prejudice, justice, the courage to stand up for what's right, even when it means going against everyone else.
Exactly. So for those listening, what are some key things to keep in mind as we move forward with the book?
Well, pay close attention to how Lee uses the subtle details to foreshadow what's to come. And notice how Jem and Scout continue to grow, how they learn from their experiences. And watch how Atticus navigates all that racial prejudice as he gets ready to defend Tom Robinson.
And let's not forget about Calpurnia.
Oh, right.
Her perspective, her ability to move between two worlds. It's a real lesson in empathy and understanding.
As we keep going with To Kill a Mockingbird, I think it's important to ask ourselves, what does it really mean to stand up against injustice? What are the costs, the potential rewards? And how can we, like Atticus and Calpurnia, use our own voices and actions to challenge those prejudices we see all around us?
Those are some big questions, and I think they reach far beyond this book. But as we continue our deep dive, I hope you'll keep thinking about them, both within the story and in your own lives. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll be back soon with our next chapter.